Hi, everybody. I'm here with my wonderful friend Andrew Harvey to tell you about CMED's new spring series. It's a series on mysticism, and I'm delighted. We have well, I think of it as the spring mystical teachings, and I thought that I would organize with brilliant teachers because after a year of COVID, after a year of insulation and isolation, that it was appropriate to do a wonderful trilogy of exploring into yourself matters that are erupting in people's spirits. And I can tell by the feedback that I get, by questions that I receive from people, that it's time for an exploration into what's happening inside of us, what's happening around us, and matters of the soul that are erupting in people everywhere. The chaos that has come about through a pandemic, through all the social changes, through everything that's erupting, is also erupting within us. And it's bringing up soul size issues. And we don't go into the soul unescorted. And so this spring mystical series is a way of escorting you into, I think, the most relevant spiritual matters that can be explored. And so we're first going to start with Jesus, and that's Andrew's expertise. And from there, we go into Mirror by Star, who will take you into an exploration of John of the Cross and the Dark Night of the Soul in contemporary language. How do you recognize a dark night of the soul, and how do you journey through that? And the third, which will be in June, will be my work with organic divinity and Teresa of Avila and the mansions of your soul and the power of grace. And so, with that in mind, I thought I would talk to Andrew about Jesus and how he sees Jesus these days. And so I'd like to start with, first of all, thank you. Thank you, thank you. And Andrew, just in case you don't know, although I'm sure most of you do, is a renowned author. He's authored over 30 books. His area of expertise extends from Rumi and Eastern religions to Christianity, to Christian mystics, to the feminine mystics. And for the last many years, he has taught Christ consciousness, which is something I think is, from a mystical point of view, is exploding in the background of what's happening in the fire of transformation. So I want to start by saying, what do you think is going on with Jesus? Talk to me.
I think something quite amazing is happening at this moment in world history. And I think that what's happening at the deepest level is that the real Jesus, the real Christ consciousness, is emerging to invite and challenge everyone, whatever their religion, to dive deep into their souls to discover the divine consciousness that is original blessing, and then enact and embody that in acts of compassion and justice and standing up for the world. And what has guided my passion for Jesus is not Christianity, because in so many ways, as we all know, and we don't have to go into it, Christianity has betrayed the original glorious message of Jesus. The churches have deformed them. But what guides me is a conversation I had with the man who changed my life and who gave me the map for my life and for what's happening now. And he was a man called Father Bede Griffiths, and he was, with Thomas Merton, one of the two greatest Christian mystics of the 20th century. But he wasn't only absorbed by Christianity, he was living in South India, and he was absolutely in love with Hinduism and with Buddhism. And in his work and in his witness, he lived the true holy love consciousness that is Jesus, the cosmic love and law consciousness that is Jesus. And I had the privilege to make a film about him. And on the last day, he was 85 at the time, I went into his little hut. And he was reading the Bible, and he looked up, and he said in his absolutely pure English accent, because he was very much an English gentleman, he said, "You know, Andrew, we're living in the hour of God." And because I've been trained at Oxford, and at Oxford you learn how to ask snotty questions, I said, "What exactly, Father Bede, do you mean by the hour of God?" And he said the following. He said, "Humanity has come to the moment when it will have to choose between adoration or suicide." And he let that sink in. And then he said, there are three possibilities. And the three possibilities, he said, were, first of all, humanity will wake up to the tragic madness of many of the plans that it's addicted to and see the damage that is being done on every level and fall on its knees and ask for grace and receive it. And he said, that's totally unlikely. Then he said, humanity will just continue in its addictions and destroy itself and take a great deal of nature with it. And he said, but that's not what I believe is going to happen. And he smiled, and I wish I could just convey to you the beauty of that smile. He said, no, this is what I think is going to happen. I think in the next 20 years, and he used that sum, this was 1992, humanity will, out of its mistakes and its illusions and fantasies, manifest a vast global dark night. And when the pandemic hit, I realized this is the beginning of that period. We're now in multiple crises. The pandemic, climate collapse, the growing inequality between rich and poor, the collapse of democracy all over the world, and the rise of authoritarianism, and a soul sickness, a deep, deep paralysis and despair that's afflicting so many people. And he said, but, he said, just as in the mystic's life, the dark night prepares the birth of something amazing. He said, this dark night is going to prepare the birth of something amazing. And then he said, this is a lot for a morning, but it's governed my life and it governs my vision of the Christ. He said, look, Andrew, the fundamentalists have got it all completely wrong. It's not going to be the return of some avatar. That's so Star Wars. It's going to be the rising of the real, embodied love consciousness in millions of people who, driven by the pain of what they're experiencing, will go very deep into themselves and discover the message of the original Jesus, which is that we are all secretly divine, meant like him to incarnate that divinity and then act it out in loving, wise, urgent, guided, inspired actions that will transform Earth life and make it a mirror of truth instead of a mirror of lies. And that was his transmission. And I believe that's why I'm teaching this course, is not to invite people to become Christians, but to help people discover this amazing message of Jesus, which is not about him being the unique Son of God. Of course not. He would just be another dreary guru if that was the case. But about everyone having this amazing potential that he was living out to inspire everybody to get with the program of the evolutionary God.
Well, I have for the longest time now been devoted to teaching mysticism,
Right.
and maybe you should hit a pause button now and just say, what is mysticism and what is it that compels us? And because so much of what a mystical series is about is teaching the mystical side of life and the mystical truths. And what I so deeply believe is happening now is that the mystical laws that govern life, the laws of co-creation, are incarnating. They're revealing itself. First of all, they're revealing itself to you through your health, through you realizing that you co-create your health, that you are in charge of what goes on in your micro world, which is your body. But if you take that co-creation, if you understand co-creation in your micro health, which is a form of divine organics, you have to extend that and
Right.
realize I co-create the larger atmosphere of my life, and that all life breathes together, that we really are co-creating the events that unfold in the world. And it is a phenomenal mystical truth. And it's so grand that actually it takes your breath away.
Yes.
And as I teach my students all the time, there's no such thing as a small choice.
Right.
There's no such thing. There is no such thing as a small word that doesn't pack a creative punch. And I think within this revelation time of co-creation, we look again at what this cosmic teacher Jesus was really all about and what his message was all about, which was teaching cosmic law. He was the teacher of cosmic law, about what he really did. Andrew and I were talking, and he had a conversation with a man, one brother Lawrence, the other day. And Lawrence said that he was the Word incarnated. And that's something I've heard, but then I got it.
Yes.
And somehow it actually stopped me in my kitchen.
Yes.
And it took my breath away, because
He said that the language of the body is the language,
the language of the
Jesus.
body is the language of Jesus.
That's such an amazing thing to say.
And I think for the first time in my life, I got it at the mystical level.
Right.
That in fact, the power of the cosmos was transmitted and taught by this human being who was saying, look, these laws are working through you. And that's my message. My message is that you don't have to suffer the way you suffer. Healing is possible. That you can transform the way life is here. That is the journey of life, is to discover how powerful your soul is and to utilize the gifts of the soul over the power in the outside world. That is the essential teaching of this incredible cosmic being.
And it's a teaching for everyone. It's not a teaching just for Christians. It's a teaching for the entire world. And we were sitting on the balcony, on the porch just before this, and I was saying something that very dear to me, and that was that what's tremendously influenced me, apart from that amazing conversation with Bede, which gives the map for what's going on, is this amazing fact that in 1945 they discovered another gospel. It's called the Gospel of Thomas, and it has 117 sayings of Jesus, and it dates before the Gospels that we know and love were written. And in this gospel, Jesus gives the whole language of the body, all these laws, all these truths, in a way that go further than anything he said in the Gospels that we have. And it occurred to me when I first read this astounding Gospel, and I had the honor to introduce it in an edition that got everywhere in the world, and
Not to introduce the gospel.
to introduce the Gospel of Thomas, yes.
You didn't introduce
no,
it to
no,
the
no.
world.
I wrote an introduction
Oh,
for this particular.
yes,
No, I
right.
didn't introduce it to the world. Oh my God, no, no.
Yeah, right.
But what occurred to me when I was writing that introduction was that there's no mistake about the time, because 1945, we dropped the nuclear bomb. So there was the revelation of our potential destructiveness. And at the very moment that our destructiveness took this new leap, the alternative bomb, if you like, was discovered in the Gospel of Thomas. The bomb that could be released if we claimed the nuclear power of our soul and put it into compassionate, just action on every level of the world. And my whole work has been derived from that conversation with Bede and my deep and loving study of the Gospel of Thomas, because it's revealed to me, as indeed my study of all the great mystical traditions have revealed to me, that at this moment, when we've manifested a vast crisis out of our hubris, our pride, our separation from truth and from the laws that Carolyn is so amazing at giving us, at this moment, many of us feel so disempowered and so paralyzed, but that's not the truth. The truth is that if we can connect with these laws, and if we can believe what all the great mystics of all the traditions have told us, that we have original divine consciousness, which is entirely obedient to these laws, then what Jesus is saying, and the Buddha is saying, and the prophet is saying, and the great mystics of evolution are saying, is possible. And that is that we, empowered by this new nuclear force, can change everything here to create a world of beauty and harmony and justice and equality. So that's the big vision. But the nitty-gritty vision is, and this is where Carolyn is such a genius and why I constantly learn from her, is how do we take that big vision and how do we ground it
And live it.
and live it? And that's what I'm going to be talking about, because in Jesus' teaching, what is called the Beatitudes are his version of the laws. And they're very profound laws, and they're the laws that correspond to the discoveries in every mystical tradition, because each great prophet and mystic reinterprets in his own ways these laws. But in the Christ tradition, these laws are interpreted in a way that's unique to Jesus and uniquely important for us. And that unique importance is that in obedience to these laws doesn't simply transform our lives, which of course it does, but it also makes us agents of transformational change in the world. Because Jesus' emphasis, which is unique to Jesus, is very much on love in action. It doesn't matter a hill of beans, Jesus is saying in many different ways, that you feel you've experienced God and you've experienced the life of God and the love of God. What are you going to do with it? What are you going to actually do? Having known those laws, having experienced their mercy and their transformation, what are you going to do? Are you going to walk past that homeless person and not give them $5, her $5? Are you going to watch the destruction of democracy and not rise and do something to preserve the vehicle of communal truth? Are you going to pretend that the climate collapse isn't happening and continue to do? What are you going to do? What are we going to do once we get empowered? But the truth is that...
But I'm going to answer that.
Yes.
I need to pop in here because,
You see what I'm saying? Yes.
I think many people will oftentimes say, but what can I do?
Right.
And I just finished a series on exploring the love of power versus the power of
Right.
love. And in that, I emphasized that the quality of love that 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 the mystics were talking about, specifically Jesus, that kind of love that he was talking about was not personal, not the way I
No.
love you as a friend or David or my sibling, my brother. It's not that kind of love. It is it's a cosmic mystical love that doesn't even make sense rationally. And it's the kind of love that draws you, compels you to respond to the needs of others in a way that's bigger than your ordinary heart.
Right.
And that's in order to that's the kind of grace that comes from a force greater than yourself. And that's the cosmic Jesus power that and these words just sound so foreign coming out of my mouth, but actually that is that kind of cosmic love. And as I said in my series, we call this love because what name do we give it? But I actually think of it as the life force itself.
Right.
That what we are in touch with when we get past the concerns of our personal life and our heart opens beyond that is that we become channels for the life force itself. And I think that's what Jesus was. He just channeled the life force. And that's why people healed. And that's
And why he could walk on
and
water
why he
and do
could
the miracles.
and do the miracles because life obeyed him. And I think that that was his teaching, was that when your heart becomes that much a vessel, the life force goes through you. And we'll close this by saying this, that I think my observation is that two things. One, when Andrew was talking about what happened in 1945 with the discovery of the Gospel of Thomas and at the time of the nuclear age, as we enter the nuclear age, I think it would be a delicious lecture sometime to talk about that period of time following that, because the Nag Hammadi scrolls were discovered, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and then the shortly after that, the Dalai Lama was forced out of Tibet, which brought him and his teachings into the world. And then Vatican II happened,
Right.
which began the modernization of a church. It's gone backwards a little bit, but it did crack through, and Christian mysticism made its way into the world.
The real
And
stuff.
the real stuff. I mean, the access to great mystical teachings. So all the traditions, and Israel was born, so it was the end of the diaspora. All the 12 tribes came back. This was a phenomenal mystical coup, that an alchemical, incredible mystical happening. And then in the 60s, and I did the Phoenix series on this, in the 60s, this explosion of spirituality and light, our nuclear force exploded and woke up, as if to say, our interior force. We had to discover what our inner self was over the power of anything happening on the outside, because we had created the means of our own destruction. And the only alternative was to become conscious enough to not use the very weaponry that we had created. And if you look through the lens, and it's a mystical view of what we're experiencing, it's very much this purge of all the reasons we use to destroy each other,
Yes.
all the reasons we use to hate each other, all the reasons we use. And what, from a mystical point of view, it's a reshaping of the balance of power, whether the power of the soul is going to rule over the power of the shadow side of the human experience. And so, to the extent that we can contribute to, please get into the power of your soul. We're doing this mystical series. And Andrew will begin by sharing a cosmic view of Jesus, not a religious one,
No.
but the cosmic power that is Jesus. And then Mirabai will introduce
And that is you.
the dark night of the soul, and that's something you'll recognize because that dark night is in epidemic proportions, individually and collectively, the dark night.
It's happening.
And then I'll take you into the power of the 7 mansions of your soul, and into the power of grace, and into the power of prayer, and into the power of you and how divine organics work. And so this is the mystical spring that I'm offering you, and I'm so grateful to have Andrew as a teacher and a friend. And I hope you'll join this, because I cannot think of anything more valuable than to be escorts into your soul. Thank you, everybody.